I can tell you a Passover story that resonates with me and always will. It's a three-parter. I had a cousin that I discovered a couple of years ago. A lady lives in England who is she's my grandmother's family. There were four sons, and she belongs to one of the sons, and I belong to one of the other ones. But we never met. We were distant cousins, but we never met. But she wrote a book about the Jews of the Ukraine, and my son found it on the internet, brought it home, and I read the book, and it's my family. She wrote the story about my family. I couldn't get over it, and I never met this girl. But she had got the stories from her grandmothers and so on, and I knew all the characters in the book. And there's one part in the book where she describes the horrible things that went on. They went through the pogroms and so on in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900. And one family, she writes that Moshe and Bobsy Margulis left Polish to go to Winnipeg, Canada. Okay, that's full. Stop that. That's part one. What she didn't know in that book was, on the other receiving end, in 1927, there's a Seder at my grandfather's house. And in the middle of the Seder, the phone rings. It's the station master at the Canadian Pacific Railroad saying, I want to speak to Mr. Rusin. I have a family here with a phone number. They have his phone number. My grandfather leaves the Seder, goes to the phone, and the man says, I have the Margolis family from Russia here. What'll I do with them? And my grandfather said, put them in a taxi cab and send them to 107 Hallow Street right away. Came back, said to my grandmother, it's your family, it's your cousins are coming in, the excitement, and everybody's running up and down and screaming and make room for the people that are going to have food and so on. And in they walk. Within the half hour, and their mother and the father and four children with their Russian lamb hats and so on. And of course, my grandmother, these are her relatives, they fell on each other kissing, and they hadn't seen each other in 20 years, and they're hugging, they're kissing, the excitement. And I, to this day, remember their names. There was Moshe and Bobsy, their mother and father. Then there was Kiva, whose name was anglicized to Clifford. Now, Aaron became Harold. Miriam became Miriam, and Numa became Norman. And there they were, all four of them, and they arrived in Canada in the middle of a Seder. What could be more emotional than that? Having left the Ukraine several weeks ahead of time, making their way across the road, and there they are in the middle of a Seder. That's part two of the story.
And you were there.
And I was 6 years old, and I'm the youngest one there. Now, part three of the story is the most emotional part of the story. 50 years later, I'm the guest speaker at a Hadassah convention in Vancouver, Canada, at the time when the Russians were being brought in, when the Russian immigrants were coming in to Israel. And I struck the parallel between the Russians coming to our Seder, and I tell this whole story about the family. And the story goes over very well with the audience. When the dinner is over, people are coming up to me, congratulating me and thanking me. So one woman stands in front of me and she says, Monty, I think I'm related to you. Really? What was your name? She says, my name was Miriam Margulis. I looked at her and I said, Miriam, did you hear the story that I just told about the family? She says, oh, she says, what a beautiful story. I loved it. I said, Miriam, I said, that was your family. She recoiled and started to cry at not knowing that it was her family, because she was just a little baby at the time. When she found out it was her family, the emotion that welled up inside of her, and I started to cry. I mean, it was such a moment. It starts with the book, the story, leaving for Canada, coming to our Seder, and 50 years later, the speech brings it right into focus. It is, you can't write a script like that.